Dennis, it's been an unbelievable start to 2026. I don't even know how to wrap my head around everything that's happening around the world, but I appreciate being able to call you and get your thoughts. Let's talk about Iran and Venezuela. I'd love your thoughts on what is happening. Start with Venezuela. How do you view President Trump's taking of Maduro?
Before I talk about that, I want to comment on it's hard to get a wrap on the world. You and I and everybody we know, basically, everyone in our circle of co-workers and friends, we have that view. How do you get an understanding of what is going on in the world today? Imagine the average person. That's why so many people tune out. And so many young people get whatever they know from Instagram or TikTok. They've sort of given up trying to understand the world. And there are so many disparate voices out there. They don't know whom to trust. It's a very difficult time, to say the least.
Most successful country in Latin America. How did it become a country where people are eating their pets, where 90% of the population are poor, over 60% of the population are extremely poor? Socialism.
Franklin Camargo, you work for us here at PragerU. You fled Venezuela. There is no better person to speak about what's happening right now.
The U.S. didn't kidnap a president, as some people are saying. They captured a terrorist. They captured an indicted drug trafficker.
Did somebody betray Maduro?
Someone had to do it. The question is who, right? So Delcy Rodriguez is a Marxist. She's radical. No reasons to actually trust her. Maybe she was involved in this.
Do you think Maria Machado has a chance of winning should she run?
Look, Maria Corina Machado has the support of most of Venezuelans. But if Maria Corina Machado right now goes to Venezuela, she's going to be arrested. There is no sovereignty in Venezuela.
Hola, Franklin. Can we make Venezuela great again?
We can make Venezuela great again.
I bet you this has been the busiest month since you moved from Venezuela to the United States.
Yes, you have no idea. I've done so many press hits in English, in Spanish. Everyone is calling me. Everyone is texting me. But, I'm really happy right now.
Yeah, so you're happy.
I'm really happy. I'm working really hard, but I'm having one of the best weeks of my life. Probably this is going to be the best month of my life, because something that maybe I could imagine, but it was just a fantasy, but not even a fantasy. The fact that someone who did so much to destroy my life, to destroy my family, to destroy the country I was born in, is going to spend the rest of his life in prison. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, I guess we'll see what they end up deciding. For those who are watching and are new to the conversation about Venezuela, which, we can expect that most people go about their lives and they don't know that much about the background of your country. They might be surprised suddenly the United States is getting involved in Venezuela. Can you give us a little bit of a history?
Yes. First, Venezuela is a country that you should be concerned about. It's a country that is only 3,000 miles away from Florida, which means that, Miami is closer to Caracas, Venezuela, than it is to Los Angeles. So we actually need to know about Venezuela and know their links with China, Iran, Russia, and how important that is to the United States and to our national security. Venezuela used to be the most successful country in Latin America. Probably people, when they hear Venezuela, yes, now they hear Maduro, his capture, people are poor, people are suffering, but why? Well, actually, it wasn't always like that. It used to be the richest country, the fourth largest economy, GDP per capita, in the 1950s. And it also has the largest oil reserves in the world. How did it become a country where people are eating their pets, where 90% of the population are poor, over 60% of the population are extremely poor? Socialism. So for a long time, it was a successful country when we had actually American companies investing in Venezuelan oil. People say Trump wants to steal Venezuelan oil. The U.S. wants to loot Venezuela. Historically, they did businesses for a long time. And when that happened, Venezuela was actually so successful, a country full of opportunities for investment, for foreigners, Europeans would go to Venezuela and they would move there and they would have a great life. But then they thought that they were rich and they took freedom for granted. They took wealth for granted. They thought they could try socialism because, yeah, it didn't work in China. It didn't work in Cuba. Cubans were warning Venezuelans. My mom always tells me this. Cubans were telling Venezuelans, like, do not vote for socialism. Chavez, that guy, he sounds like Fidel Castro. You should be careful. Venezuelans were like, we have oil. That's not going to happen to us. So right now, Venezuela has the largest refugee crisis in the Western Hemisphere. 25% of Venezuelans have left the country. So that's like in the US, probably 85 million people live in the country. Not because they hate their country, but because they need to leave it in order to survive. So they don't go to prison, so they are not killed, or so they don't die from, not eating.
So let's get into history. Hugo Chavez gets elected in 1999 on the platform that he's going to give more social benefits to Venezuelans, that they're going to have free education, that they're going to have free health care, that other countries, Western countries, are robbing Venezuela of its oil, and therefore they're going to bring it all in-house and they're going to manage all in-house. Did your parents ever talk to you about that era? Did they believe that? Did they vote for him?
Yeah, they didn't. And actually, my mom she never liked him. And my parents, they both were very pro-America. Let me tell you an interesting story. Their honeymoon was in Washington, D.C. They always embraced American values. They liked capitalism.
Were they unique?
Yes, I would say they were probably unique, for sure. At least at that moment, that's why Chavez won. So this guy, he first tried to remove a Democratic-elected president in 1992 by force. He was a member of the military. He went to prison because he failed. Then he was pardoned by a Democratic Socialist president, by a center-left president. Then he ran for office. Something also that is very important to mention is that before Chavez took power, Venezuela was already trying some socialist policies. It was like democratic socialism, like soft socialism, some welfare state, some economic intervention, some statism. That didn't work because some inflation, poverty increased, businessmen were not investing as much as they used to. And then Chavez said, you know what, we're not really trying socialism. We need to try it the right way. We're going to go after the rich. We're going to go after corporations. We're going to go after American imperialism. And he did it. So I like to say that actually Chavez accomplished many of his promises. He promised equality. Well, if you have 90% of the population living in poverty, probably that's as close as you can get to equality.
Right. Everybody is equally poor.
Equally poor, equally miserable. So my parents, they never liked him. So I grew up in a place where, and this is the interesting fact about Venezuela, when you are, when you grew up in that system, in that regime, is that everyone who is older than you would tell you how great the country used to be, how successful, how
Because you never
peaceful.
saw it successful. You
Exactly.
were born into it.
Yes, and I never saw it, but my parents would always tell me about all the opportunities. And then you would find people who were older from Portugal, from Spain, from Italy, even from the Middle East. And they would tell you, I came to this country 30 years ago, 50 years ago, because this country was great. I was in my own country and I used to hear about Venezuela. Oh, I can go there and make my life better. But that's not the country I saw. Socialism was destroying my country slowly. And that's everything I saw. That's everything I have seen in the country I was born in.
What did you see? Describe to me your childhood in Venezuela, because you live here now in the United States. So you can really compare it and describe to a Westerner, what is it that we're not seeing that's happening to the child who grows up in Venezuela?
So first is that people are concerned about things that are not even a concern in the United States. I talk about poverty rate in Venezuela, but it's a level of poverty that sometimes you cannot even imagine.
We can't even comprehend
Exactly. This is not about getting I cannot get the new iPhone, or I cannot go to Europe this year. No. You don't know what you're talking about. This is about people not being able to eat. This is about people having to eat their pets. This is about parents stopping from, getting steak or eating food and just maybe finding some rice and eggs and very bad quality food in order to survive. This is about people losing weight. In 2016, I was still in Venezuela. I was already a political activist. There was a very famous term. It was the Maduro diet.
Hmm.
People were losing weight. This is not a myth. I'm not exaggerating. The
So
average
you would walk into, let's say, a store, a supermarket, and what would you see or what would you not see?
empty shelves, long lines, and you were on, if you had some money, because many people didn't have money at all, you were only able to purchase some basic products if it was your turn. So basically, we have like something that is like social security, like an identification number. And the government would regulate what days you can buy food. So let's say your social security number in the Venezuelan ID, your identification number ends on 9. You can only buy products on Thursdays. And you can only buy maybe 2 packs of sugar or 1 milk or 1 steak. They would regulate that because there was scarcity. And the
Hmm.
scarcity was a result of government regulations. How does it feel? Well, you would see people that probably you haven't seen in weeks, months, or a year. They would be skinnier. The average Venezuelan lost 24 pounds in 2016. This is a real data, and you would see it. You would witness this.
Mhm.
People were skinnier, and you wouldn't even ask, oh, are you working out? No, you could tell. You knew already. They were skinnier because they were hungry,
Mhm.
and they were hungry because of the socialist policies.
Can you describe the transition between Chavez and Maduro? At this point, you were already a young teenager,
Yeah,
right?
14, 13, 14, yeah.
Do you remember it? So
Yeah.
Chavez dies. Maduro is the VP. He becomes the new leader. Did things change significantly after that?
So Chavez had cancer, and there was a lot of secrets in the government about is he really sick, how sick he is. He went to Cuba in December 2012 to have a surgery, and for 3 months, he didn't appear at all. He didn't make a statement. He didn't give an interview. He was healthy, he was good, but you didn't know anything. So there was a rumor that he died. And then in March 2013, they announced finally that he actually died. And I know this is not very Christian, but I have to be honest. And I also need to understand how a kid feels in a context like a dictatorship in a regime. I was 14, and when I saw the news that Chavez had died, I was happy. I was actually happy because I felt that someone that was destroying my life, that was making my life worse, that was going after people that I love, at least wasn't in this world anymore.
As a
And I had
young
some hope.
Venezuelan man, were you unique in your sentiment that you didn't like Chavez? Or were other young men more loyal to him?
So at that point, the popularity of the regime was very low already. And this is the thing about socialism. And socialism at the beginning, a lot of people, like, he won democratically.
Mm.
He ran and he won, sadly, because he promised many things that were, attractive to some people. But when you actually witness the bad results of those policies, at least most of the individuals, as they want to have a good life, they start rejecting that. However, it was too late already. There were not democratic tools to remove him from power. So when he died, especially my generation who grew up in that context, even though some individuals, some people could think, well, you didn't know any better, so how do you feel? No, we knew that wasn't good because it's just human nature. When you cannot express yourself, you know that is not right. When you know that you don't have food to eat, you know that is not right. And of course, also in the age of social media, you can compare your country to other countries. In my example, and my story, I was able to come to the US when I was a kid. I was only 6. I didn't know anything about politics. I didn't understand economics. But wow, what a contrast. I was astonished by the differences between a free society and an oppressed society. I was amazed by the grocery stores. You were asking me about the grocery stores. I was amazed by the grocery stores. So at that point when Chavez died, most of Venezuelans, especially young Venezuelans, they didn't like him already. But then, and there was some hope. Maybe if he died, this mafia, this dictatorship, this regime is going to be weaker than ever. Well, it's a mafia. You might remove the head, but the mafia is still there, especially when they are linked to China, Russia, Iran, Cuba. So then Maduro took power. And, some people like to ask the question, was he better or worse than Chavez? He was just different, and he had to deal with different contexts and different complications as well, and different challenges. But at the end, Chavez was the one who started the revolution. Some people like to whitewash Chavez because he didn't have to deal with many of the things that Maduro had to deal. But he was the one who started the revolution. He was the one who destroyed institutions. He was the one who made Venezuela the country that it is, which is a miserable country, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, the way you describe it is true. I think many of us perceive life under Maduro for Venezuelans being much worse than Chavez, mostly because finally we got the footage of the food lines and people like you who fled and came here and told us the stories. Did Venezuelans get a sense that China, Iran, Russia are involved in Venezuela? Because when Chavez ran originally, it was an anti-West sentiment,
Yes.
right? It's like America is robbing us of our oil. We're going to detach ourselves and we're going to be free, except you sold yourselves to other nations, dictators, worse nations, right? So we see this looking from the outside. But did Venezuelans who are living under Maduro realize that they basically chose China versus the United States of America?
Yes. And I have a fact for you. And Venezuelans know this. It's not just that I'm very well informed based on what I do. No, Venezuelans know this as a true fact. We talk about Venezuela as the country that has the largest oil reserves. Yes. Do you know that 80 to 90% of that oil goes to China? And China doesn't even pay for it because Venezuela, the Venezuelan regime, owes money to China and they pay it through oil. And Venezuelans know this. And this is funny because in the last few days, in the last week, we have been talking about, Trump wants to get Venezuelan oil. He wants to loot your oil. And American leftists who are on the left, they were talking to Venezuelans and they're like, you don't care about that? You don't care that Trump wants to steal your oil? Do you think that Venezuelans are getting oil? Like how do you actually think that looks like? Venezuelans are starving and that oil is being given to China.
Why?
And because there are some economic relationships between China and Venezuela. So China invested money in Venezuela, money that only went to the regime and to the members of the regime. And Venezuela is paying that back through oil. There is also intelligence, Chinese intelligence. There is Russian weapons in Venezuela. There are Cuban agents. In this operation, 32 Cuban agents were killed by this successful, amazing American operation. So when a leftist who is protesting in New York and is waving a Venezuelan flag, not to support the people of Venezuela, but to support a regime and a dictatorship, when they ask Venezuelans, why don't you care about the oil? Why don't you care about Trump wanting to steal your oil? Well, it's because the oil is being actually stolen by China for many years. And for a long time before the socialist revolution, there was a long history of relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela. And how did Venezuela do back then? It was the most successful country of South America. So I think it's hard to understand for some Americans or for some people on the left, but Venezuelans actually are right now very pro-America. And there is even a joke that you hear that we make between Venezuelans, even when I was in Venezuela, and is that we would refer to the U.S. as the empire, sarcastically, because that's how Chavez would talk about. That's how Maduro used to talk about the United States of America. So it would be, have you been to the empire? Or are you gonna go to the empire for a family vacation? Oh, that's great. Yeah, because the empire is evil. It's so evil, but in a sarcastic tone, because everyone knows that America is a successful country, it's a safe country, it's an ally to freedom fighters. So yes, Venezuelans know what China represents, Iran, Russia, Cuba, and they also understand that right now their biggest allies, those who love freedom, those who want to be free, is the United States, and more precisely, is the Trump administration.
It's interesting as you bring up the allies. CARE, which is a Muslim advocacy group here in the United States, came out against the recognition of Machado receiving her Nobel Peace Prize and also against the capturing of Maduro, of course, now from Venezuela. So I think it's this classic example of this Islamic Marxist alliance that they obviously are unhappy with. And those are part of those NGOs that are pumping this information, this anti-Trump, pro-Maduro information. They want us to continue to support China and the Islamic regimes really taking control over places like Venezuela.
Yeah, we're like, it doesn't make any sense. A trans activist would wave a trans flag and 2 weeks later would wave Hamas flag or a Palestinian flag, then 2 months later is waving a Venezuelan flag defending Maduro. Why is that? It doesn't make any sense. No, it actually makes sense. David Horowitz used to say, the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. This is about fighting the West. The cause, Venezuela, trans issues, Hamas, anti-Israel propaganda, that's the excuse. That's just a tool to actually put people on the streets fighting against America, fighting against American values. If you actually make people or young people empathize with Maduro, you are actually embracing anti-American values, and it's self-destructive because we have talked about so many things, but Maduro also caused harm to the American people, to U.S. citizens. When Lakin Riley was killed by a member of Tren de Aragua that was sent by Maduro, Maduro was doing that. The Venezuelan regime was doing that. He was causing harm to American citizens. That's why he was indicted in a U.S. Federal court in southern New York. So why are young people in America leftists actually celebrating this or supporting someone who did this? Because at the end, the issue is just an excuse. They are fighting against Western civilization. It's all well connected and are the same organizations. The People's Forum, Answer Coalition, it's just the same politician. It's Mandani in New York City who actually condemned this Trump's operation. Why would he do that? Well, we actually know why. It's just an excuse. It's a tool to fight Western values. It's to fight America, and it's a very anti-American thing to do.
When you were living there and your friends who I'm assuming you're still somewhat in touch with,
Yeah.
did you get a sense that there is an alliance with China and the Islamic? Is it something that you feel in the country versus the way it is felt when you're an ally with the United States? I think when you're an ally with the United States, it feels that way. There's a shared language, there's a shared culture, freedom. Did it feel different for you when you were in Venezuela? Do you think the residents of Venezuela feel that there is a communist, fascist overload?
Yes, they underestimated it for a while, and that's the problem sometimes with population in countries. They underestimate socialism. They underestimate these evil empires, as Ronald Reagan would call them, evil empires. But at the end, you realize that. You realize that you are not free. You realize that this regime, the people who are oppressing you, they are connected with the most horrible politicians and governments in the world. But when you try to change that, it's already too late. And that's actually my warning to Americans into free societies and free countries, is that don't wait too much. You know, you need to fight back. It's never too early to fight back. Those ideas, the level of indoctrination, the level of anti-American sentiment is something very dangerous. Why does the left hate America? They hate America because American values and American ideas are anti-left. It's about right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's anti-socialist. That's anti-socialism. It's, property rights. You want to be rich? That's fine. Inequality, it's okay if we're all free and at the end we can all be successful. We are going to be unequally successful. That is anti-socialist. So that's why they're fighting the left and they're fighting Western values. And at the end, Venezuelans, they also understand that. So are you actually telling me that we're more free now than American companies are not doing businesses with us? If I'm hungry, if I'm starving, is the United States an evil empire when people there are free? They can criticize their government. I have relatives, they know what I'm doing in the US and they see that I'm doing way better now that I'm here and that I was able to flee. They know that if I had stayed in Venezuela, I would be in prison. So they know who their ally is, and they also recognize that China, Russia, Iran, Cuba, they have harmed Venezuela.
Right. So they realize that not only have they been harmed by these countries,
Yeah.
but they're being used by these countries to
Yes.
attack the
And
United
looted.
States.
Yeah.
So I want to go into your story because I know your story, but
Yeah.
your story is quite compelling. You were living in Venezuela. You were in college. You were pre-med, if I recall.
Yes.
And you stumble upon PragerU videos
Yes.
on the internet, and I guess I can call it a re-education
Yes.
that you received. Just tell us real quick, how did you get from being a pre-med student who was kicked out of school to a podcaster for PragerU?
So as I said, after I could witness the results of a free society, America, I could tell, yeah, you guys were doing something different. I don't know what you guys are doing. That's what 6-year-old Franklin thought. But you guys are doing something different. I would like my country to be like that. I would like to live in a country like that one. So, I was always into politics in some way or another. I grew up in a very political environment. My parents, they were business people. They would talk about politics. So when I was a teenager, I started to read. I put my eyes on everything I could read. Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand, who is a big inspiration for me. And then I was watching videos on YouTube as well, and I stumbled across a PragerU video. It was Dennis Prager on the American Trinity. I didn't speak English back then, right? And it had some Spanish subtitles. And the video was about the American Trinity, which basically is what makes America great, what it means to be an American. And is in God we trust. We understand that there is a God, that morality is objective, that what is good, and what is evil is simply evil. Liberty, every individual has the right to be free because we have a God, and our rights come from God. And a pluribus unum, which is out of many one. And it's an amazing principle because it means if you embrace American values, you are an American. It's not about your ethnicity, as some people want to put it nowadays. It's not about that. It's about your values. It's about your assimilation. It's about your ideas. And that video had a huge impact on me. And now tell me that the American dream doesn't exist. If I was in Venezuela, oppressed, not being able to speak out, and I was watching a PragerU video, and then I'm here talking to PragerU's CEO, and I'm part of PragerU.
Yeah.
That is the American dream. So yeah, I saw that video. I was reading a lot. I was into politics. I also started college, and I was doing political activism. I worked with Maria Corina Machado, the leader of the Venezuelan opposition.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I worked for her political movement. I have pictures with her where I look so young. You have no idea. I look like a kid. I would lead peaceful protests. I would give speeches at college campuses. And I even had a debate with a professor, which caused me to be expelled from college. My case went viral, and I was accused of being a terrorist. There is an anti-hate speech law in Venezuela, which basically means that if you speak out against the government, they're going to say that's hateful speech because it's speech that they hate, and they would go after you. So I had to flee. I had to leave Venezuela in order to save my life. And what country would be better for me than the country that showed me what freedom looks like, and that actually gave me a moral and political, philosophical guide for what a society should be like. And now people ask me, why are you still into politics, or why do you do what I do, right? And the biggest reason, or the biggest thing I could say, is not to victimize myself. Don't feel sorry for me. I'm having the time of my life. I'm so grateful. I couldn't be more blessed. I'm the most blessed individual here, really. You guys were blessed to be born here. I was blessed to come here legally. And now I spend my time being grateful about this. I talk about this because it's my way to pay back what this country did to me. This country saved my life. I have a cousin who was in prison for 2 years. He was tortured. I have friends who are political prisoners in Venezuela right now. That wasn't my case. And I'm very grateful for that. And in a huge part, it was because I was able to come here. So I also talk about these issues, and I talk about politics, and I'm into politics. So Americans don't have to go through the same things that my family had to go through.
I hear from people like you in Venezuela. They write me, whether through DMs, and I know it's a risk for them.
Yeah.
I can imagine, especially right now, it's a risk to contact us. And so I just want to give a shout out to our friends out there who have been communicating with us and asking us to pray for them and celebrate with them. And I know what risk it takes. How do you get to the news on what's actually happening out there?
So first, yes, they're at risk by sending you messages, because if you're working on the streets, someone that works for the regime, they could just stop you on the streets and ask you for your phone. They would check your WhatsApp or your social media. And if you have been posting content against the regime or pro-America content, they would arrest you. And who knows what. So yes, they're putting their lives at risk. So most of journalists who are Venezuelans, they're either just in prison or they are outside the country. However, they have sources in Venezuela. I even have sources. I have family or friends who are into politics, and they get some information that they send to me. So that's the way that you have. But there is no free press in Venezuela. Actually, in the few days right after the operation, some journalists were arrested just because they posted information about the operation. They were not even celebrating. They were just basically informing people. It was like 14, 15 journalists.
What are you hearing from them right now? Are they afraid? Are they hopeful? Are they optimistic?
This is going to sound like a contradiction, but they're afraid and they're also optimistic. Sometimes in the darkest moments is when you can actually see a light, even though it sounds like a contradiction in terms, right? But what is happening right now with the regime is that, yes, they're going after people. There is still a brutal repression, but it seems like the regime is weaker than ever. And it's weaker than ever because, I mean, we shouldn't underestimate what just happened. We had the most powerful country in the world going into Venezuela, capturing the head of a mafia, the leader of a mafia, not a government, not a country, a cartel, an indicted narco-terrorist. No American died. So now Delcy Rodriguez, who was Maduro's VP, she's in power. So Trump can call her and tell her, do what I'm telling you to do, or you're going to pay a higher price than Maduro paid. So I think that's a huge incentive, and that's a reason to be hopeful. So Venezuelans are afraid, but I have never seen them this happy.
So the VP, Delcy Rodriguez, is relatively new. Do you think she is in control of the situation? And do you think she could play ball with President Trump? Or, I mean, do you trust her? Do people trust her?
No, people don't trust her, but we trust the Trump administration. And there are reasons to do it, not just based on talk, but actions. So Delcy Rodriguez is a Marxist. For people to understand, she grew up in a Marxist family. In the 70s, before the socialist revolution, her father was a Marxist activist, a Marxist terrorist who actually kidnapped an American businessman who was in Venezuela. So that's the family that she grew up in. She's a Marxist. She's radical. No reasons to actually trust her. She's been working for this socialist regime for 2 decades. And now she was the VP. So it makes sense. You know, she's now the president, but she's not a legitimate president. That's important to clarify. But she's the de facto president. So this is about being pragmatic. A lot of people are asking, why no Maria Corina Machado? Why it seems like Donald Trump is not really supporting Maria Corina Machado? Look, Maria Corina Machado has the support of most of Venezuelans, inside the country and outside the country. But if Maria Corina Machado right now goes to Caracas, she goes to Venezuela, she's going to be arrested. Why? Because even though she has the consent of Venezuelans, the army doesn't support her. So it's about having the de facto power. So the alternative that the Trump administration found that I think is the most realistic alternative is to have those who are still in power right now that can control the army, that can control those repressive evil groups, yes, but that can do what the Trump administration tells them to do. And then in the long term, we can have a more peaceful political transition with free elections, and Maria Corina Machado, who I appreciate a lot, could run. So it's a very pragmatic thing to do. And I probably find it as the only path to freedom.
Do you think Maria Machado has a chance of winning should she run? I mean, you really know her, right? Is she strong enough to lead a country like that one?
Yes, and she's the most popular figure right now. Probably, I mean, there cannot be elections right now for a very simple fact. If you don't control the army or if you don't have strong institutions, are you really going to trust having an electoral process? Like Maria Corina Machado cannot even be in the country. But after a political transition, when Venezuela is, a more peaceful country, and you can actually have elections.
Who creates that transition, Franklin? Who does that?
So if you want me to quote Trump, it would be Trump. It would be him saying we're running the country. How do they run the country from Washington, D.C.? By having those who are right now in power doing everything that Trump tells them to do. Now, there are some political prisoners who have been freed. So at least it seems like they're playing ball right now. Is it going to work in the long term? We have to pay attention to that. I don't trust Delcy Rodriguez. I want to be very clear about that. But I trust the Trump administration. And Delcy Rodriguez shouldn't underestimate Trump's words. Maduro was dancing on stage. He was challenging Trump. He was telling him, come here, I'm waiting for you. And now he's in New York, where I hope he spends the rest of his life, right? Let's see what happens. Dolce Rodriguez, is she going to do the same? I think it would be very stupid if she does the same.
It's a bizarre expectation for us as Americans that our president would help create a transition for a country that is not ours, right?
Yeah.
Venezuela is not ours.
Yeah.
Our own president needs to run a transition in other countries. It seems like a strange expectation. Certainly, I understand the moral element of helping the Venezuelans, but it is America first. You live in America now.
Yes.
You work for an American company.
Yeah.
PragerU is all about America. Now, how do you think Americans should think about
So first,
this?
I think we shouldn't put any Americans at risk at all. I don't think we should put boots on the ground. I don't think we should do that. But if there are other things that we can do, like that operation that was so precise and so effective in order to have a political transition in Venezuela that would work both for Venezuelans and Americans, I think that would be good for the West and it would be good for the US. I was telling you about Venezuela having the largest oil reserves and 80 to 90% of that oil going to China. Is that good for the US? Is it good for the US to have China 3,000 miles away from Miami? No, it is not good. So if there is something that you could do without putting any Americans at risk, I think you should do it. And there's going to be an economic benefit from that. And that is amazing. Venezuelans are going to enjoy that. Americans are going to enjoy that too. I'm American first. Right now, my loyalty is to America, not to Venezuela. Of course, I'm really interested to what is happening right now. It's very personal to me based on my background, my story. But at the same time, I want what is best for America. And I think that if there is something we could do in order to have a pro-West, pro-America ally in Venezuela that would be good economically, geopolitically, politically to the United States, I think we should do it without putting any Americans at risk.
One of the other concerns are the drugs that are making it into the United States from Venezuela. It's not fentanyl, which I know we mostly talk about, but it's cocaine and other drugs, right?
Yes, and it is very important. It shouldn't be underestimated. You know, cocaine enriches a cartel that at the end is also connected with those cartels who are bringing fentanyl to the U.S. When it comes to cocaine that is coming from Venezuela, they are still killing Americans and they are making Americans addict. And there is such a criminal organization connected to that is very dangerous. And it's a duty for the U.S. to protect its own borders.
Are you aware of drugs coming in from China? Because you keep talking about the China and Venezuelan alliance. Does China use Venezuela as a launching pad here in the Western Hemisphere to get drugs into the United States? Is it possible that fentanyl comes in through China into Venezuela, into the United States?
Well, we know that China works with the Mexican cartel, so I wouldn't be surprised if China is also connected with the drug trafficking that comes from Venezuela. But at the same time, like the criminal cartel that is in Venezuela operates with Colombia in Colombian cartels. So it's all interconnected, and they use Venezuela and they have used the regime to do that. And actually, one of the charges that Maduro has is conspiracy to import cocaine. So when we talk about Venezuela, sometimes we forget about so many issues because there are so many elements that are in play that all of them are harming American citizens.
Who originally charged Maduro in 2020?
So it was a federal grand jury in southern New York in 2020. So we're talking about an actual case, an actual trial with non-political people. Though it was the grand jury with no political background, no bias, who saw all the facts, all the case, and they decided to charge Maduro.
And then what? They just did nothing with it once he was indicted?
Yeah, initially. So there was a reward, a $15 million reward that was first implemented by Trump during his first Trump administration. Then Biden, he didn't remove it. He increased it to 25. And it was later increased by the second Trump administration to 50. But it's been Trump in this administration, of course, and Marco Rubio, that has finally captured Maduro. And this is important because some people would say this was an extrajudicial capture. Well, there is, a judicial order to actually detain him for his crimes against American citizens.
Well, and it sounds like it was a complete bipartisan decision, given that you had Trump, then Biden, then Trump again. So what's the issue?
It used to be bipartisan, but it was bipartisan in name only or in rhetoric only. At the end, the moral compass is broken, or Dennis Prager would say it doesn't even exist when it comes to the left. They just react to whatever Trump says or does, and they immediately oppose it. It doesn't matter what it is. The funny aspect of this is that Schumer, the Democrat leader in the Senate, he said in 2020, Trump, you haven't done enough to go after Maduro. 5, 6 years later, after Maduro is being captured, instead of saying, you know what, Trump, you did a great job. Thank you for putting America first. Thank you for going after a communist. Is he doing that? Is he saying that? No. He has criticized Trump just 5, 6 years later after saying, you haven't done enough. That's the left in America.
I want to take a beat and just recognize how incredible the U.S. military has been.
Incredible.
Not just in the case of Venezuela, but what they did in Iran. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been very much concerned that none of us want to send boots on the ground. We don't want to enlist our kids in another war.
Mhm.
But I mean, books have to be written about these operations, just completely changing the scene of what military work looks like. It's just out of another world.
No, it's just insane. You know, people have been asking me, do you expect this? Maybe my most optimistic, thought was maybe they pressure Maduro so much that he leaves and he goes to Egypt or Russia. I mean, I wasn't very optimistic about that, but sure. But like the U.S. military going into Venezuela, capturing him without no American dying, as it should be. No American should die in Venezuela or any other country. What a successful
Unbelievable
mission. No one could
intelligence
do it.
work,
Just,
right? I
just,
mean,
just America.
do you think there was somebody from the inside? I mean, the
Yes.
intelligence work that had to have been done to accomplish that. Are any of your Venezuelan friends giving you any hints on how did this happen? Did somebody betray Maduro?
So that's the rumor, right? That someone had to betray Maduro in order for this to happen. And when you had only just a few hours after the incident, you had Trump and Marco Rubio giving a press conference, and they were saying that they are talking to Delcy Rodriguez. So even though I just told you that I don't trust her, and I maintain this, I do not trust her, most likely, maybe she was involved in this.
Wow.
Maybe she betrayed Maduro. Someone had to do it. The question is who, right? But it's actually very likely. Yeah.
So you've lived here for a few years as a Latino American. You went through the last Trump election. There has been a kerfuffle, a fight over whether Latino Americans are pro the Trump administration or against the Trump administration. Many of them came out and voted for him. Then there were the ICE raids, where the narrative we heard on CNN and many other platforms was that that's it. Republicans will never get Latinos to vote for Republicans again. Now you have Marco Rubio. I see the memes
Yeah.
all over the
Incredible.
internet. Have Latino Americans changed their tune about President Trump?
So the thing about Latinos is that there are so many different groups, right? You talk about, we can talk about Mexicans, or more like Central Americans, more like West Coast Latinos. You can also talk about East Coast Latino, Venezuelans, Cubans.
Yeah.
When we talk about Florida, for instance, I don't think a Democrat or a progressive candidate would ever win there in a generation, at least. Yeah, and I'm being 100% honest. Not just because Trump did this, which is already like the biggest achievement ever for our community in that sense, in foreign policy, but when we see the reaction from Democrats, is so disappointing to see. Why would you be angry at this? Why would you be mad at this? They are quoting international law. How did international law help Venezuelans that were suffering? How did international law help Ukrainians when Russia invaded Ukraine? And they make so many false equivalents, like, oh, now China is going to invade Taiwan. Do you really think that what is stopping China is just a paper or international law? What is stopping China is President Trump, having President Trump in the White House.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I want to clarify, Maduro wasn't a president. He was a narco-terrorist. Venezuela is not really, like, there is no sovereignty in Venezuela. China is there, as I said. And sovereignty, in that case, even if we consider that, shouldn't be an excuse to commit crimes to another country. That's like saying that property rights is enough for me to commit crimes inside my house against someone. No, I think we should do something about it, especially if it's in the U.S., interest. So yes, right now, like Florida, I think it's gonna be even more red, more red than ever. But Hispanics are very different. It depends on where they come from, how old they are, where they are. But of course, this is a huge win for Hispanics.
Yeah, you mentioned international law. I don't think anybody takes the international law seriously anymore. There's no way to even, penalize any country that goes against it. Clearly, we've seen that all over the world.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's even a piece of paper. If it is a piece of paper, it's not what it's worth
It is not
at all,
working.
right?
Even the United Nations, they're
Yeah.
mad about this.
Which, incidentally, the United Nations was cheering for the opposition leader when she received the Nobel Peace
Yes,
Prize. So on the
exactly.
one hand, they were cheering for her and giving her the Nobel Peace Prize, but because Trump got involved now
It's
they are no
different.
longer cheering for her.
Yes, and what is funny about the United Nations is that now they're complaining about this. Well, it's the same United Nations that would have Venezuela or Cuba in the Human Rights Council. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same that has permanent members like China, Russia. So at the end, we need to have a conversation about this. Of course, we need to talk about this. We need to debate about this. But at the end, international law is not preventing evil countries, evil empires from committing crimes. It's not protecting Christians in Nigeria. It's not protecting Venezuelans in Venezuela. It's not protecting, or it hasn't protected Cubans in Cuba for 6 decades. So the facts are actually very clear. And we need to have a conversation about this. Now, because I have seen some political commentators talking about, what if China now invades Taiwan? That would be the same, like the U.S. invading Venezuela. There is a huge difference. The thing is that the left doesn't want to define good and evil, but morality is subjective. We know that. Dennis Prager knows this very well. We need to make a distinction. In China, you cannot criticize your government. That's an evil empire. In the US, you can do that. In Taiwan, you have a free country. In Venezuela, you don't have a free country. If you post on social media, you go to jail. So, of course, there is a huge difference. The US didn't kidnap a president, as some people are saying. They captured a terrorist. They captured an indicted drug trafficker. And the difference, the contrast couldn't be clearer, and it's important to highlight.
Well, how many Venezuelans want Donald Trump and the Trump administration to step into Venezuela, and how many Taiwanese want China and Xi Jinping to step into Taiwan? How about you just answer that simple question if we're talking about morality and what people want? We spend a lot of time about morality and ethics and the suffering of people, but let's just talk about pragmatic America First claims. So the petrodollar is a significant element here. And I think not enough people are speaking about the significance of how oil is traded around the world. As of now, it's traded through dollars.
Yeah.
What happens if countries like Venezuela continue to get captured by China and Russia, and we move away from the petrodollar, essentially paying for oil via dollars, to paying and bartering for oil with either the yen or any of the other currencies? What that would do to the American economy. If there's anybody who can understand inflation, it's a Venezuelan who's lived under inflation. So let's capture that very significant element of this geopolitical conflict.
So as a powerful country and having a powerful currency, you want other countries to use your currency, especially when they're making transactions on so many important things like energy, oil, petroleum. You want that. Why? Because that means more demand for your currency, more demand for dollars, and that makes the currency stronger. When you have Venezuela making or doing businesses with China, and they're not using the dollar, actually that makes the dollar weaker. Those are so important, powerful transactions that when they are made with other currencies, that in some way actually makes our currency, the US dollar, weaker. So there is even an economic argument to make, not just a geopolitical, not just not even in petroleum or energy in itself, but even as a currency issue. If the dollar is weaker, prices go up. Inflation, by definition, is the expansion of money supply. So what it means is that things get more expensive because your money has less value. Now, if Venezuela, again, one more time, the country with the largest oil reserves, is exchanging in oil transactions with dollars, that is great. That is good for the United States.
So even as of now, the exchange between China and Venezuela, even sometimes it's in the case they used barter, but when they wouldn't use barter, they would use the dollars. But they were moving away from dollars in order to weaken the United States. I mean, this is an economic war. If you look at the entire picture globally, whether it's tariffs or our fight for a strong dollar, this is an economic war in many cases, in lieu of boots on the ground, in lieu of bombs and fire. And I think people need to recognize that you don't get to eat the cake and have it too. You want to have a strong economy. At the end of the day, if you ask any American, what do you care about the most? It's security and economy,
Yeah.
right? Your breadbasket. Can you feed your family? Can you feed yourself? And so if we allow our adversaries, China, Russia, Iran, to weaken our dollar, we cannot be surprised if we wake up weaker.
Yes. And the best thing is that it would actually be a win-win, because some people would ask right now, what about Venezuela? So what about Venezuela? Leftists would ask that question, pretending they actually care. They don't care because they have never cared. If they actually care, they would be complaining about China being there, right? It would be a win-win.
So it's not just Americans who care about their dollars and making money, but you're saying it's a win-win because now Venezuelans will have more money. And so the entire financial pie increases, not a
Exactly.
zero-sum game.
And even in the long term, immediately would be an effect, but even in the long term, Venezuela is only producing like 1 million or even less than that oil or barrels every day, when they could easily produce 3, 4, 5 million. Like, it has the largest oil reserves. That means that if we want to produce more, if Venezuela wants to produce more, which would be good for a global economy, Americans or corporations need to invest there. They need to put money on assets, infrastructure. They, of course, need to take a risk, which that's how a relationship works. So are the U.S. going to gain something from that? Of course, and they should. But Venezuelans are also going to gain from that. And actually, I would say they are the ones who are going to benefit the most. Americans are going to benefit, but Venezuelans are going to see their lives change the most. And it's actually good. So those leftists who try to care about Venezuelan oil, where have you been the last 25 years?
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like America first to me. I probably spend too much time on X, but maybe not as much time as you do. So I pick up on all kinds of nonsense from silly podcasters. And people have asked me a question about this term global homo that is now going. I can't even say it with a straight face, but we've had a serious conversation about morality and geopolitics and money. And so now we can get into the silliness of some of the podcasters out there. What is that?
That's the narrative that some people have, that the reason why the U.S. now is involved in Venezuela and they want to have a political transition is to implement, to promote homosexuality in Venezuela.
Now, I wouldn't even bring this up if it wasn't some people who I've taken seriously over the years bring it up.
Yeah, you have important podcasters like
Tucker Carlson, right?
Carlson,
So
or you
what
have
is this?
Candace Owens. That doesn't make any sense. And Tucker said something along the lines that Maduro is actually a conservative leader. Let me tell you something. He had put priests, religious leaders, in prison for criticizing the regime. Is that conservative? Is that what Western values look like to you?
Christians.
No.
Putting
Yes.
Christians in jail.
Maduro has put Christians in jail for criticizing his regime. Catholics, Protestants in jail for criticizing the regime. Actually, he has even gone after Mormon churches. He has nationalized Mormon churches. That's what Maduro has done in Venezuela. So is that what conservatism looks like to you? No, Maduro is not a conservative. He's not the most woke person. I have to be honest about that too. He's not necessarily woke, but he's not pro-Western values or ideas. He doesn't respect Christians. He's not a Christian. So stop with the global homo conspiracy.
What does that mean? Like homosexuals?
Yeah, it's like promoting homosexuality in Venezuela by having a regime change or something, which doesn't make any sense. Your face is exactly what it is. It doesn't make any sense. It's weird. It shouldn't be taken seriously. The thing is that these people have, large audiences. That's why we need to talk about this. But it doesn't make any sense. It's not a serious analysis.
Honestly, it's just bizarre. It doesn't happen very often where I have nothing to say, but I'm just dumbfounded by how bizarre the whole thing is.
Basically, that means that, we sent Americans, the best people, in the world, the most trained, to capture Maduro just because you want more gay people in Venezuela. That's what ultimately that would mean, which doesn't make any sense.
I don't understand how anybody can take any of this stuff seriously.
It shouldn't be taken seriously.
What a waste of time. Final question. What do you think realistically Venezuela looks like in the next year?
I think it's going to be a tough year. The regime is going to still be in power for this year. However, they're going to make some, they're going to giving up stuff. They're going to try to follow what Trump is telling them to do. And in the long term, not this year, but I think the next year, we're going to have an actual political transition that is going to lead to free elections. That is going to lead to a big change to Venezuelans and to the American people as well. But this year, we're going to see some businesses get done between American companies and Venezuelan oil, and that is good for both parties. And the Venezuelan regime has to compromise, or they want to spend the rest of their lives in New York, in a prison, because everyone would like to spend, well, maybe not now with Mandan in power, right? But they would
They're
like
the
to
perfect
be in
fit.
America. Yeah, exactly. So I'm optimistic. I have never seen the regime this weak. I don't trust the regime. They're still in power, but they have never been this weak. If there is a moment to be optimistic, is now. This is going to be a tough year. It's going to be a difficult year. Some people might wonder this year in a few months, well, nothing has really changed. It's in the long term that I think we're going to see something. But just the fact, even if I hope the regime, of course, is removed entirely. Even if it's not removed entirely, just the fact of seeing Maduro being detained, you have no idea how happy I am. And by the way, the first picture, the most viral picture of him with a bottle of water and the Nike outfit, a communist with a Nike outfit, right? But with a bottle of water, he's drinking water. Political prisoners in Venezuela do not drink water. They do not eat. So ironically, because he's in a free country, Maduro is in a free country with a rule of law, he's been treated way better than any other political prisoner in Venezuela. And actually, as I see all Venezuelans as prisoners, he's been treated better than most of Venezuelans because he eats 3 times per day. He has healthcare. He has medicines. Venezuelans don't have that. So ironically, just because he's in the best country in the world where there is rule of law and it's a constitutional republic, even when he's not having a good time, and that makes me so happy, he's still being treated better than most of Venezuelans.
Interesting point. As we walked in here, you mentioned to me that some people have been messaging you that their political prisoner friends are being released from Venezuelan prisons. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And I'm grateful to Donald Trump and Marco Rubio because this is not about the regime being nice. This is about Trump doing this. So it has a huge impact. Some people are just saying, well, Maduro is in New York, and what? How does that change my life?
Who is releasing these political prisoners now? Do you know?
Yes, the regime is doing it because they have to, because Trump told them to do it, because Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, told them to do it. They have to do it, or are they going to pay the same price that Maduro is paying?
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that's real change. People who were in prison, being tortured for years, right now they're going to hug their family members again.
They must be crying from happiness, just going home. That's amazing.
Yes. He's a peacemaker.
Well, we're going to keep watching you. I'm sure you're going to be posting on social media all kinds of updates. And, I'm happy for you. I'm
really happy too for Venezuela and for the United States. This is really good for the United States. And the fact that it was the United States who did it, it makes it even better.
We're the best country on God's green earth.
The greatest.
That's what we are. There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
How can people find you if they want to keep up to date?
Yes, they can find me on social media, Instagram, TikTok, X. If they just type Franklin Camargo, my name, they're going to find me. So yeah.
And of course, on PragerU, you have your shows.
Of course, on PragerU, I create content on a weekly basis. Yes. PragerU Espanol and PragerU in English as well.
That's right. Well, Franklin, thank you for everything and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.